What recognition is Somaliland entitled to? Here we describe the type of recognition that Somaliland is entitled to.
وهجاك داوديال مدحوين حسن شيخ محمود جبوتي أيا لوgu yeeray waxaana lagu yiri saaxiib annaga Djouti hadaynu nahay ma xamili karno.
Somalia is not a country. Why does it even exist? Somalia is not a country. It's a failed project built on the idea of a non-existent third entity.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Dhammaan ummadda islaamka meel kasta joogtaan aad baad u mahadsantihiin. wa welcome Jamal channelkaygu hadduna subscribe ku hayn subscribe like tan aadan kugu leeyahay like share comment intaba dhankaaga weeyaan aad iyo aad 20,000 oo subscribe waxay nooga hadhay waxaanan gaarayn 2,700 oo subscribe ayaa ka hadhay inta baydiya gaarsiiyay bal ku tuura maanta arimo cusub ayaa idin hayaa Somaliland iyo Mareykanka waa tii base la siinayay berbera kamid ah Mareykankii maraakiibtiisii dhowaan inay imaadaan baa macquul ah heshiisyo wanaagsan oo hoos ahaan oo ku bilaabid doontaan ayaa jira bal maanta waxaan soo daawan doonaa waxyaabo cusub aad iyo Somaliland markasta waa tii Guuleysatey aad iyo hanu soo daawano
وهجاك داوديال مدحوين حسن شيخ محمود جبوتي أيا لوgu yeeray waxaana lagu yiri saaxiib annaga Djouti hadaynu nahay ma xamili karno xoutiyiinta weeraradoodii iyo gantaaladoodii ee Mareykanka adiga goob lagu weeraro xoutiyiinta si awalba Soomaaliya burbursanayde si xoutiyiinta ay hor u burburiyaan oo ay ku soo weeraraan sida saxda ah ee hadalka iyo yeerista Ismaaciil Cumar Geele u dhiganto waa sidaas macnaha yaan wax la isku qarqarin aniga sideedaba wax la qarqariyadan ma aqaano baasha wajigan dadka ka saara ninka odayga ah Ismaaciil Cumar Geele la yiraahdo da ahaan حسن شيخ محمود هو كوين يحي أخلي أهان وكأخل بدن يحي سياسة أهان وكسياسة بدن يحي وايو نين كان مددر أيو سياسة كسوجري حتى بمرك يصير عصات هاي حسن شيخ محمود مع أخبار دونا حالستا إسماعيل عمر جيله إسكوري جنيو اللجوري جنيو مع اللجوع عددين يو حسن شيخ محمود واحد لزعتان إسماعيل عمر جيله وحمريكان كأسو جدي أما أي ويديستين إن جوب xoutiyiinta lagu weeraro Djouti laga siiyo balse Ismaaciil Cumar Geele oo akhli iyo siyaasad Ilaahay siiyay ayaa wuxuu ogaaday inaysan dan ugu jirin shacabka dalka iyo isagaba sidaas awgeed uu iska cagwareejiyay wuxuu yiri iga daaya Soomaaliyan maartay akhli laheena ayagan qoorta u gelinayna kadib Xasan Sheekh Maxamuud ayaa loo yeeray hadda marka halis ayaa hortaala Xasan Sheekh Maxamuud saddex halis oo waaweyn ayaa hortaala oo Djiboutina mas'uul ay ka tahay halisyadaasi kow halisyada waxay tahay haddii Xasan Sheekh Maxamuud uu aqbalo in Mareykanka goob uu ku weeraro xoutiyiinta la siiyo kow waxaa dhici doona in xoutiyiinta iyagana ay Soomaaliya soo weeraraan gaar ahaan waxay weerari doonaan dekada airportka iyo waliba madaxtooyada Soomaaliya صار صعطانا مريكان كقلبك أو هيستو أما إسرائيل قلبك أي هيستو دفاع هودا ما هيستان صوماليا سيدس أوجد ستريت جنتالك يمن لغا صوتورو ستوسا مدحتيدا أيو كقرا عنايا جنتالك لغا صوتورو يمن ستريت دكد أيو كقدينايا مثل كلنا هالكاس إيو مارتا ايربورك أيو كعشينايا هدبا حسن شيخ محمود حالستاس كوبات أيو وجهايا حالستا لباد محيطهاي حالستا لباد وحيطهاي إن حوتيينتا أي قلبيان هب عسري أهنا أي سيان أرورك على الشباب إيو داعش متكوت متكي مركز أي إسفهمان حالستا سدحات محيطهاي حالستا سدحات وحيطهاي وحدي حسن شيخ محمود وديدو دلبكا إسماعيل عمر جيلي إن قوب lagu weeraro xoutiyiinta Mareykanka la siiyo waxayna tahay in haddii Xasan uu diido Mareykanka si toos ah ula macaamili doono Somalilandna waxa uu weydiisan doonaa in goob ay siiyaan si xoutiyiinta halkaasi loogu weeraro kadibna Somaliland waxay soo bandhigi doontaa iyadana waan idin siinaynaa ama ictiraafaysaan macnaha ictiraaf ay ku bedelan doonaan kadibna aqoonsiga Somaliland Mareykanka oo dantiisa fiirsanayo wuu aqbali doonaa Somalilandna Mareykan sidaas ayuu ku aqoonsan doonaa laakiin halisteedii ayay wadataa mid la mid ah mid Xasan Sheekh Maxamuud oo ah in xuutiyiinta ay soo weerari karaan somalilan maadaama somalilan ay fadhiisamo siiyeen maraykanka si xuutiyiinta loo weeraro marka saddexdaas waaweyn ee halis ayaa hor yaalla xasan sheekh maxamuud aqligiisa dadnimadiisa iyo siyaasaddiisa ayaa lagu tijaabinaya xasan sheekh maxamuud sida badan lagu soo tuuray ismaaciil cumar geele uu ku soo tuuray siduu uga dabaalan lahaa oo uga bixi lahaa wabilaahi towfiiq muuqaalkana saxab badan la sii sheergaray haddii aday ugu cusub tahayna faalow isoo dheh oo ila soo wadaag
haddaanu reer somalilan nahay mar kasta inagu dhinaca wanaagsan ayaanu ka talinaa somalilan sababtay mar kasta u guuldalaysan lahaday waxay tahay qalbiyadooda ayaa xaadhan aad yaa haanu soo daawana weli
What recognition is Somaliland entitled to? Here we describe the type of recognition that Somaliland is entitled to. There are two types of recognition a country can have: de jure recognition and de facto recognition. I will explain it to you now, so listen carefully. De jure and de facto recognitions are the modes of recognition of the state. Recognition is the declaration of existence in terms. De facto recognition is provisional. Is the primary step to de jure recognition, which is fully recognized. When a regime changes, it is an existing state letting know the political entity of another state. Simple announcements cannot do it. The Montevideo Convention 1933 implies for qualifications to be recognized such as permanent population, definite territory, government, capacity to enter into relations with other states. Recognition of government. When a state recognizes a government, it acknowledges a group of persons as competent to act as an organ of the state in question and to represent it in terms of international law. Legal effects of recognition. Recognized state becomes entitled to sue in the courts of the recognizing state. Recognized state is entitled to sovereign immunity for itself as well as its property in the courts of recognizing state. Recognized state is entitled succession and possession of property situated in the territory of the recognizing state. Recognized state may enter into diplomatic and treaty relationships with the recognizing state de jure recognition. Recognizing state gives effect to past legislative and executive acts of recognized state retroactivity of recognition. De facto recognition. Special cases arise where a legitimate government loses all or part of its power over the state and even flees abroad, becoming a government in exile. And this control is being exercised on the ground by a new, different government. It is called the de facto government. If a state maintains normal diplomatic relations with a new government, this is merely a declaration that the new government is effective, but not that it is legitimate. One doctrine holds that a government that has come to power by coup d'etat or revolution should not be recognized or regarded as legitimate until it has received democratic confirmation. De jure recognition. When a regime changes by revolt, the legitimate government loses all its power. Even though in practice, the former government sometimes continues to be recognized as the legitimate government, the de jure government, even if it has lost effective control of the state, at least temporarily. As we all know, Somaliland was recognized de jure status on June 26, 1960, which is based by lateral agreement from the government of UK and the government of Somaliland. I will now read independence documents. Agreements and exchanges of letters between the government of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and the government of Somaliland. In connection with the attainment of independence by Somaliland. Hargeisa, June 26, 1960. Presented to Parliament by the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs by command of Her Majesty June 26, 1960. This letter was the letter between the two governments of the UK and Somaliland transferring responsibility for the country. I am also including the letter from a UK Queen. By the Queen. A proclamation. Terminating Her Majesty's protection over the Somaliland Protectorate. Whereas the territories in Africa known as the Somaliland Protectorate are under our protection. And whereas by treaty, grant usage, lawful means we have power and Somaliland Protectorate, sufferance and other jurisdiction in the. And whereas it is intended that the Somaliland Protectorate shall become an independent country on the 26th day of June 1960 hereinafter referred to as the appointed day. Now therefore we do hereby, by and with the advice of our Privy Council, proclaim and declare that, as from the beginning of the appointed day, our protection over the territories known as the Somaliland Protectorate shall cease, and all treaties and agreements in force immediately before the appointed day between us or our government of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and any of the tribes of the said territories, all our obligations existing immediately before that day towards the said territories and all functions, powers, rights, authority or jurisdiction exercisable by us immediately before that day in or in relation to the said territories by treaty, grant, usage, sufferance, or otherwise, shall lapse. Given at our court at Buckingham Palace, this 23rd day of June in the year of our Lord 1960, and in the 9th year of our reign. That means the state of Somaliland has been already recognized by the UK government on June 26, 1960, with de jure status. Can de jure recognition be revoked? Withdrawal of a de jure recognition in international law is a very exceptional event. If strictly interpreted, the de jure recognition can be withdrawn. Even though the process of recognition is a political act, de jure recognition is of legal nature. The government of Somaliland should immediately clarify its status legally with the British government, as it cannot normally revoke de jure recognition, especially when it is linked to independence. Somaliland needs only re-recognition as status as de jure state. Thank you and see you next video.
Somalia is not a country. Why does it even exist? Somalia is not a country. It's a failed project built on the idea of a non-existent third entity meant to be called the Somali Republic. Somalia did not just commit genocide against the Isaac community, it launched a full-scale campaign to erase Somaliland from existence. Landmines, aerial bombings, mass executions. This was not just war, it was an attempt to wipe out Somaliland's people, making it easy to invade and commit demographic change. All while seizing a strategically vital location, by wiping out an entire indigenous population and stealing their homeland. Somalia's systematic genocide against Somaliland reached horrific depths, with attempts to use chemical weapons in 1989 as part of its quest for a final solution to the Isaac problem. In January 1987, Major General Morgan, a key figure in Somalia's genocidal campaign, sent an official military report to his father-in-law, the genocidal dictator Siad Barre, recommending final solution measures for Somalia's Isaac problem. This death letter was a chilling blueprint for ethnic cleansing, suggesting the systematic extermination of an entire indigenous people to pave the way for Somalia's annexation. This document reveals the premeditated nature of the genocide and how it was seen as a strategic solution to a political problem. An absolute violation of humanity masked as statecraft. The brutality of this attack reveals the lengths to which Somalia would go to fulfill its expansionist goals, seeing the annihilation of Somaliland's indigenous population as a means to an end. And even today, Somalia continues its assault, not with bombs, but with propaganda, erasing Somaliland's rightful history and denying its people their sovereignty. This is not just ethnic cleansing, it's a calculated, long-term occupation disguised as diplomacy. This map represents the territorial extent of Somalia, an entity whose sovereignty is questionable under international law. Somalia's statehood was never formally established and is based on a failed, unratified union with Somaliland. The area shown here is what is legally recognized as Somalia in the absence of its territorial false claims over the Republic of Somaliland, an independent and sovereign state. On July 1, 1960, Republic of Somaliland's independence and recognition were needed to give Somalia legitimacy, as Somalia was still under the UN trusteeship of Italian colonial rule. While Somaliland was already an independent country that had gained its independence from Britain, yet that union was never legally valid. The Somali Republic was a theoretical construct meant to merge Somaliland's sovereign territory with a non-state Somalia. A merger that never came to existence because there is no treaty was ratified, and the union itself was illegal. Now, the Republic of Somaliland, a fully de jure independent and recognized state, is being asked to surrender its sovereignty to a non-state entity like Somalia. A failed entity that's never had proper credentials to be recognized as a country. How can an independent, sovereign, and a de jure functional Somaliland be expected to submit to a territory that never legitimately existed and which is still failing to meet the most basic requirements of statehood? Failed Somalia did not become a legitimate state by accident. It needs the Republic of Somaliland's existence and recognition to legitimize its own empty claims to authority. A sovereign, independent nation versus a failed non-state. For those who are not up to speed, Republic of Somaliland is a legally sovereign state that has never truly lost its independence since gaining it on June 26, 1960. Despite being annexed and forcibly taken over by non-state Somalia under the idea of uniting the two to form something called the Somali Republic, Somaliland has remained a distinct country with its own governance, economy, and legal frameworks, in line with state continuity. The illegal union with Somalia was an unratified union, an annexation, not a legitimate treaty. Somalia, on the other hand, is not a recognized state under international law. It is the entity that failed to meet the legal conditions for statehood and illegally claims Somaliland's recognized sovereignty. The core issue here is not political, it's legal. Republic of Somaliland holds all the rights to its territorial integrity and existence, while non-state Somalia is the one that needs to face the world's legal obligations to establish itself properly. International recognition for Somalia is an ongoing farce, overshadowing the undeniable fact that Somaliland was and continues to be an independent state. Even as Somalia clings to an illusory vision of a unity that never existed, and it's a clear violation of international law. Since the African Union already acknowledged in 2005 that no ratified union existed, Somaliland has a firm legal standing. The One Somalia fantasy is just political fiction. Failed Somalia, as we know it today, did not gain its independence on July 1, 1960. Instead, it was seeking independence, and the only way to achieve that was through a union with the already independent and sovereign Republic of Somaliland, which was already an independent country with international recognition since June 26, 1960. Now, when non-state Somalia collapsed in 1991, the Republic of Somaliland restored its independence from June 26, 1960, and began functioning independently and legitimately. So, how is it that Somalia sovereignty over the de jure Republic of Somaliland? In reality, if international law were applied fairly, Somalia's claim could be occupation rather than legitimate governance. The whole narrative of a One Somalia is essentially a political fiction designed to steal the rightful sovereignty of the Republic of Somaliland. If the rules of international law were respected, Somaliland should be the one recognized, not Somalia. Some argue that the union was voluntary, but that's just a convenient myth. The plan was to create a new, joint entity called the Somali Republic, but that never actually happened. Why? Because Somalia, desperate to gain independence, hijacked Somaliland's credentials and unilaterally submitted them to the UN under the name Republic of Somalia, effectively erasing Somaliland's sovereignty and annexing the country. The international law does not acknowledge voluntary unions in the way Somalia claims with Somaliland. I'm talking about the legal standards for how a country's sovereignty and territorial integrity are treated. In international law, a union of states is supposed to follow specific legal processes, especially when it comes to the transfer of sovereignty. Voluntary unions are not just about agreeing in talks. They need to be 1. Ratified by both parties in a formal way. 2. Explicitly defined in international treaties and agreements. 3. Recognized by the international community. In the case of Republic of Somaliland and Somalia, there was no formal treaty, no official ratification, and no clear, binding agreement. The union was not a legal, recognized creation of international law. Instead, it was an annexation. One entity state forcing itself on another state under the guise of unity. Think about it this way: international law doesn't just automatically assume two countries volunteering to unite. Instead, sovereignty is something inviolable, and any attempt to take it or merge without proper legal procedures would be seen as illegal under just Kogan's norms. That's why Somaliland's claim to independence is not just a political stance but a legal right. Its statehood has always existed since 1960. And Somalia's claims are based on an illegitimate annexation that didn't follow proper legal processes. And even today, non-state Somalia shamelessly upholds this annexation, falsely claiming Somaliland as a part of its failed entity. But let's be real. How can an older, sovereign country be part of a non-state that never had independence credentials and was still under colonial rule? Somaliland existed as a distinct nation for thousands of years, long before and after its brief protectorate status under Britain. The real question is, how does a collapsed, illegitimate entity like Somalia have the audacity to claim ownership over a country that was never theirs to begin with? The world is backing a failed fraudulent entity. We live in a world where recognized, sovereign nations like the Republic of Somaliland are being pressured to abandon their independence and submit to failed states, and for what? The idea of one Somalia. A dangerous relic that forces an independent nation to submit to annexation and be under a dysfunctional collapsed system that never properly existed in the first place. Why should Somaliland, a democratically governed and resource-rich country, be asked to surrender its sovereignty, earned on June 26, 1960 to a non-state that doesn't even meet basic criteria for legitimacy? Somalia, in all its instability and historical failure, has no moral or legal authority to claim what was never theirs to begin with. The One Somalia fantasy risks normalizing territorial expansionism and sets a dangerous precedent for other regions of the world. Somalia's questionable independence. It is important to consider that Somalia's independence is itself questionable. Instead of truly gaining independence, Somalia's formation was largely centered around trying to merge with the already independent Republic of Somaliland. In this context, Somalia is using Somaliland's independent credentials and UN seat to assert itself on the international stage. Despite not having gained statehood in the same manner as the Republic of Somaliland, which was an independent entity since June 26, 1960. Somalia is the true imposter in this scenario, hijacking the legitimate independence of Somaliland, which was recognized worldwide. Now, they are audaciously labeling Somaliland as a breakaway region when it is simply reclaiming what was rightfully its own. It's a ridiculous and absurd case of historical theft, with non-state Somalia trying to rewrite the narrative and erase Somaliland's sovereignty to maintain a political facade. The real irony: Somalia is calling the shots on a seat in the UN that should never have been theirs to begin with, leveraging Somaliland's independence to legitimize their own non-existent statehood. The world needs to wake up to this insanity. A theft of statehood. When Somaliland restored its independence again in 1991, it did so as a continuation of the same state that existed in 1960. The legal and historical links back to 1960 make it clear that Somaliland's statehood has always been intact. And it simply chose to reassert its independence when the annexation by non-state Somalia collapsed. On the other hand, Somalia is engaging in theft of statehood because it has wrongfully claimed ownership of the identity, legal treaties, and sovereignty that rightfully belong to the Republic of Somaliland. Somalia is trying to erase the distinct legal existence of Somaliland and falsely equate its statehood with Somaliland's independence. Despite Somalia not having met the same legal conditions for statehood in 1960. Essentially, Somalia is stealing Somaliland's statehood and presenting it as its own to manipulate international recognition. The diplomatic recognition given to Somalia is fundamentally flawed because, as we've established, in legal terms, it doesn't exist. This is why Somalia pushes the secessionist narrative so desperately. It enables them to mislead the world and cover up Somaliland's rightful statehood, perpetuating a false political story. Non-state Somalia's goal is clear: erase this history, suppress the truth, and claim sovereignty over a state that was never absorbed into theirs. If the world understood this fundamental reality, Somalia's unsteady diplomatic claim to Somaliland would have no leg to stand on. In essence, Somalia is trying to gaslight the world, rewriting history and masking the truth to manipulate global perception. Their claim is not about protecting territorial integrity, it's about blocking the international community from investigating if Somalia itself an actual state or not. What we have been seeing from Somalia is not a territorial dispute, it's a struggle for control over a narrative, with Somalia doing everything in its power to maintain a false narrative, misleading the world and continuing to lie on Somaliland's legitimate legal statehood. Somalia is not a state. It's the one that actually needs recognition from the international community and to fulfill the international law to achieve their statehood. The country that meant to be called Somali Republic never legally came into existence, meaning Somalia did not automatically inherit statehood when it collapsed in 1991. Somalia is not just a failed state. It's an international fraud, and the world has continued to pretend that Somalia is the rightful inheritor of that independence. In reality, Somalia's existence since 1991 is not just a mistake. It's an international disgrace. A failed non-state that still begs for foreign aid, while Republic of Somaliland, a real state that has endured brutal genocide, a military occupation, and under the harshest sanctions for the past 64 years, somehow thrives against all odds. The world has been duped into propping up failed Somalia, an entity that was never meant to be a state in the first place. It's the most failed state on earth, yet the world continues to support its fraudulence. Somalia is not just asking for recognition, it's demanding legitimacy for something that was never lawfully established. The true anomaly is not only that the world forced a sovereign de jure Republic of Somaliland to seek re-recognition, but that non-state Somalia's illegitimate statehood has not been exposed for what it truly is, a mirage built on international fraud.
haddii aad ilaa dhammaadkii ila joogtay aad bay u mahadsan tahay qalbi furan qol furan iyo qaar kaloo badan mar kasta like-ta iga iloow videoga subscribe-tan adigaan kugu leeyahay wax kastoo fikradahaaga commentiga igula soo wadaag aad baad u mahadsan tihiin qalbiga idiga ogsooni jimca mubaarak